Blood Time, the podcast that speaks to the bond, the emotion between coach and athlete at the interscholastic and intercollegiate level. Each interview, each segment will reveal that bond and what was learned, how they were transformed, and what each athlete took to the world at large from that transformation. These stories will warm your heart and astound you altogether. Submitted for your approval. Now it is blood time. Hey guys, I want to thank our newest sponsor, Affinity Whole Health, and the owner, Brian Zide. He started this company to get you feeling like you were in your prime. You can reach this company at feelgreatcleveland.com. Founded obviously by a former wrestler-athlete and his partner, who's also a former wrestler and athlete. The whole goal for this is to get you feeling like you're in your prime, but also helps you with muscle definition and strength, increased libido, increased energy and drive, increased mental acuity, obviously increases your confidence if you get all those, and increases recovery time from workouts. If you like all those things and you want all those things, check them out at feelgreatcleveland.com. Thank you again, Brian Zide and Affinity Whole Health. Blood Time. It's Coach Cimoroni here. I want to thank my last guest, Lee Kemp, world-class wrestler, arguably one of the top 5 wrestlers on the entire continents ever produced of North America and South America. Maybe we'll have a discussion about that. It was interesting, too, what he said about how he would love to round robin with Jordan Burroughs and Kyle Dake if he was maybe 35 years younger. But what came through in that interview were 2 things that really hit me. When he talked about Wrestled Away, his documentary, which is out, please get it, support Lee, is humility and gratitude. It's an amazing thing when you're at that level and how truly grateful he sounded and was to be able to live the life he's lived, even with the ups and downs, and the humility of what he has been given on this planet and how he has matriculated through in a beautiful way. I love Lee Kemp, and I love what he stands for, and I want to thank him again. I want to thank my phenomenal producer, Mav Peters, here. He's been doing a phenomenal job these last 10 or 11 episodes, and we have somebody here today that is absolutely dear to my heart. I've known this young man since he was probably in 5th or 6th grade, maybe even earlier. I've known of him, and I also had the opportunity and honor to coach him, and then back when he became a attorney, he had the opportunity before he got into his practice deep and heavy to become an assistant coach of mine. And I want to welcome Michael Goldberg. Hello, Michael. How you doing, babe?
I'm great. It's great to be here.
Yeah. I have a little emotion in my voice. This is you and Scott Peters, to me, engender really what this is all about. Blood time, this bond, and what occurred between you and I, and then what you did with that is just magnificent. And it's rare where I feel this, but I got to tell you, I feel it, and I love you being here. So, well, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
I'll tell you, so do I. And blood time. Really, we're blood brothers.
Yes, we are.
Brothers from another mother.
Exactly.
And I think you probably knew me before I was in 5th grade because I rode the bus with Christine, your sister.
Oh, my gosh.
And I am sure I was the subject of a lot of complaints by her to her family. And I'm sure she threatened me with having her brother come on the bus. So you probably knew me from before.
The only guy that I had to do that with was with Craig, because Greg Gottsagen was torturing my poor little brother Craig and stealing his side. But I was a senior by the time. But anyhow, go ahead. Yeah, it was great. Fantastic.
So yeah, I feel like I grew up with your family, and for sure from when I started wrestling, you were always around, and you and I've been connected through the times we coached together.
Yep.
And just being brothers.
Absolutely. And I remember when I really first met you as an adult. When we were 15, 16, 17-year-olds, we're pretty much adults at that point.
Maybe you, but...
Yeah, well, you were getting close to being an adult. And I remember, you had a really tough freshman year. You didn't do very well.
Sophomore.
Maybe your sophomore year. Yeah, it was your sophomore.
So I was JV. I was wrestling. It was
Right,
JV
right.
my freshman year.
Right. I did not coach you your freshman year.
So I did okay.
I was in the room a little bit with Sorkin. I remember I was helping Sorkin out because he popped out his knee, and I was working with him, and I was not on staff officially, but the first year I was on staff officially, you were a sophomore, and you had a tough sophomore year. And I remember you got beat by Lenny Cosentino, was it at
sectionals?
At sectionals.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to you, and I don't know if you remember this, I said, if you come back next year, I'm going to be your worst nightmare. And I wrestled with you every day, and you gave me everything. And I had, man strength, and you gave me everything you could. And man, I just saw this transformation in you, and it was just beautiful. And I knew you engendered in me, you inspired in me that I could become a coach. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I didn't know I was doing that, but I'm glad I did.
You did.
I wasn't so self-aware of a lot of things back then, but yeah, that sophomore year was very tough, and I won a few matches, lost most of the matches, and the thing was, I was on. It was my first varsity year, and I was basically my third or fourth year of really wrestling, of competitive wrestling, and Beachwood teams at that time, and this is the late '70s, were legendary. And when I was in 8th grade, we had Stone and Fisher in the room.
Sure.
And then in 9th grade, Sorkin, Levine, not to mention all-time greats like Tommy Weiss, David Sternberg, Stuart Smiley, Butch Lapsley, everybody in the room. And all of a sudden, that my sophomore year, that 126 position in the lineup was open. I think I wrestled off for it, and there it was in the lineup.
Right.
And I think physically I probably was ready to compete. Mentally, I don't think I was ready. Right. And I think when you mentioned that Lenny Cosentino, that was one of those matches where when was a sophomore, I was like, I'm never going to beat this guy. He's a senior. He probably was not a great wrestler. I don't think he made state, but I just saw him as being older and better, and I didn't have
physically mature too. What I mean, he was just
he was hairy.
He was hairy. He was a man. At that point.
I just didn't see myself beating him, and really between that kind of crappy, adverse sophomore year and coming back for my junior year, I did go through a big mindset change.
Yes.
My body didn't change that much. I was at 32 my sophomore year, but my brain had changed considerably.
Yeah, I could see that.
And so that's where I started to become successful.
And it was interesting because, that is the golden era, right? You had Sorkin and Levine winning 2 state championships in the same year, and I think it was in '77. And I kind of think about the three of you, Tolan and Lapsley, kind of like Butch and the Sundance Kid, maybe Django, And so you brought that kind of swagger, but it was confidence. It wasn't arrogance, which I loved about you guys. But also too, what I recognized there as a young coach is that I could truly connect with you guys. So from the chair to the mat, I felt you. That was the first time that I said to myself, something in my brain, something in my heart, I could transfer to these guys. They could take it out there. Now, of course, we did it every day in practice room too. We worked, and we went at it. Okay, but there was a confidence and there was a connection, and you knew I had your back, and I knew that you guys were not going to disappoint me, except for Revere. Having said that, we all have our days, right? So that's the beauty too of youth, is learning from those mistakes as well. So tell me, when you went, and I don't know if you had the same kind of effect there, but you did affect me. Butch affected me. Tolan affected me. And I wanted you guys to succeed more than I wanted myself to succeed. And it was the first time in my life that I became selfless. I wanted other people to do better than I. And frankly, I didn't have your talent. No matter how hard I worked, I just was not physically gifted enough at that point to do well. Okay, I did okay, but I didn't do well. So tell me what that meant to you, if it did mean anything, and tell me how it affected you as you went into college and you went on to life, and some of the magnificent things that you've done in your career and in your life.
Well, I will tell you that when having been a coach with you and in other experiences in wrestling, it's that point when you love the kids, they become more important to you, and their success becomes more important than what you do. It's not about you anymore. No. That's when you really feel what coaching's about. And so, being a 16, 17-year-old kid, I really probably wasn't so aware of that. I was aware that I had a older mentor, somebody that was, I think you were probably out of college at the time, and you were
just out
going to grad school or something.
Yeah, I was.
And someone that had a lot of experience on me, that really cared about me, that cared about what was going on. Coach I, the head coach, cared about me too, but he also had a bunch of other kids and a bunch of other things to deal with. But I think that the special attention that an assistant coach can give a group of kids really can make a difference. And it's not like my father didn't care about me and didn't talk to me about things and didn't show me his worldview.
Of course.
But that's my dad's worldview, and it comes from a guy that grew up in the 40s.
Right.
And it's also somebody who maybe didn't look at me objectively and expected certain things from me that maybe I wasn't capable of.
Or at least at that time.
But to have somebody who was a friend / coach,
sure,
who I could really talk to about anything and things that I couldn't talk to my father about, was really important. So the main difference going from my sophomore year to my junior year was not only having the support at Beachwood and being able to have those great wrestlers in the room. And I'll just say, I was, you say I had physical talent. I was the least talented, naturally talented wrestler probably that ever made the state finals from Beachwood.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I understand what you're saying. I remember when we got to the state finals and we looked at each other and we go, how? But we did it.
Yep.
But
that's coming from
that's heart and that's brains.
Mm-hmm.
Heart and brains go a long way, Michael. They really do.
But that's coming from 3-12 as a sophomore, getting beat up, and then making state my junior year, and then making the finals.
You placed.
Yeah.
Too. You placed. Both years.
But what I say about lack of physical talent, I mean, you look at guys like Tommy Weiss, who could hit a fireman's carry on just about anybody in the country. Right. Guys like David Sternberg, who you just couldn't get your hands on. He had the natural ability to move.
Didn't make a mistake.
Butch Lapsley, who walked on a mat first time in 7th grade and was pulling stuff that guys who were wrestling for years couldn't do. I had the ability to my great ability was watching Ricky Sorkin.
Okay.
And watching how he used the top position and leg riding to score points and copying it.
Sure. And
I just copied it and did what he did. And at first I didn't know how to do it right. And it was a lot of trial and error and hundreds of hours of practice. Yep. And eventually I developed a style was based on Sorkin's style that no matter who took me down, no matter who I was wrestling, I was usually able to score points from the top on turns off of leg riding. And that got me a long way. The other thing was my sophomore going into my junior year, we all went to Doug Bluebaw's Top of the World Wrestling Camp.
Sure.
And we went there as a team, and we, I would say we were the dominant group of guys.
No doubt.
But Bluebaw taught things that Coach I...
we were good enough to go into the St. Ed's room on their request.
Right.
Remember that?
Well, I have stories about that.
Of course, yeah.
But
and the other thing too, Michael, I keep that thought in mind. You were the first wrestler that I ever coached that got his match down. But nobody was going to take their match to you. You were going to take your match to them. You had your takedown, you had your ride, and you had your escape. And I have taken that mentality all through my career as a coach, so that the guys that I coach, and everybody's got their own little thing, their own little nuance, but to get their match down, and that's a lesson in life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I'm sure when you go, and I know, you guys out there may not listening, Michael is one of the top criminal defense attorneys in town. I'm sure when you go into that courtroom, you've got yourself prepared and you've got yourself a strategy and you've got yourself your style
Correct.
that you're going to take to.
And
to
I'm not
courtroom.
intimidated.
Indeed.
And that's the direct result of my wrestling experience. And what I was going to say is at Blue Ball's camp, this is important because this was also the secret sauce. Was I learned some technique, but what I really learned was the viciousness of being a successful high school wrestler. You cannot. It's not something Coach that we learned so much at Beachwood about the mental toughness and viciousness you have to take into a match, and how you could have great technique, but if you don't work your technique with a vicious attitude, not to hurt somebody, but as Doug Blueball would say, to make them hurt, and not be afraid to inflict pain in a legal, sportsman-like way, then you can't be successful in high school wrestling. And with that secret sauce and the Beachwood room, I was able to be successful junior and senior year. And by my senior year, winning a bunch of matches, making the state finals, after that, I really felt like situations weren't going to intimidate me. And even though I found myself in over my head, in college sometimes, in law school many times, and then as a lawyer, I always took the lesson of, if I work hard enough and I prepare enough and I have the right mental attitude,
you figure it out.
I can succeed.
That's the beauty too. As a parent, I've been blessed that my kids figured it out. They've been thrown some things at their life that some people don't have, and they've figured it out. They've found their own way. They've found their own community, and they have flourished in that. And I've seen you do the same thing, and something was thrown your way that you probably never would have expected 20 years ago. And I see you wearing a beautiful hat of giving back to wrestling, Ms. Rocky Wrestling, but you wore that today because you walked in an organization that supports your wonderful son, Noah.
Autism Speaks is a national, worldwide organization to support families with children with autism or people that love people with autism. Yeah, so the wrestling and my experience with autism they're very intertwined. So my wife, Sherry, who was a teacher,
terrific advocate of the situation.
She took the bull by the horn, so to speak, when we got the diagnosis and started doing everything she could possibly do. And one of the things that she did was get involved with a now not defunct, but it was incorporated into Autism Speaks, called Cure Autism Now.
Okay.
And it was in California, and she went out to California and met with these people and the stash hours, and they were very, very big advocates for finding a cure now, raising money to find a cure.
Okay.
And over the last 20 years, the emphasis has gone from curing autism, because it is such a baffling combination of environmental and genetic factors, to dealing with autism and maximizing
therapy,
everybody's
and overall therapeutic approach to
taking each person and using their strengths to maximize their functionality and their independence,
which a lot of medicine is going to. It's a lot of personal, because my goodness gracious, we know that cancer is not just one disease. It's a myriad of diseases that occur. So, as you were saying,
and autism is really autisms. It's a spectrum, and there's numbers of genes that dozens, hundreds maybe of genes that affect how somebody presents who's on the spectrum.
Gotcha.
So that experience, when you have a child who has a pervasive developmental disorder, it can just ruin you as a person, and you have to be exceptionally strong. I think, for starters, I was just hitting my stride in my law practice, and I probably didn't get more than 3 hours of sleep for like 7 years.
It's interesting, Michael, when you say this. I know you, okay, but I really don't know what you've gone through.
Right.
And it's amazing. You see people just out in the world that are just doing fantastic stuff and everything, and you know them, you have a relationship with them. But I can't imagine getting 3 hours of sleep a night for that extended period of time.
For basically
And then,
7 years.
Yes, and then trying to be a professional and to support other
Right.
people and hearing their issue and their, we had Scott Safinovitz in here, and he's the first. And I look at it this way: that peace officer, if they're great at what they do, particularly with Scott, he's their first line of humanity with the very worst decision you've ever made in your life. You meet Scott Safinovitz.
Or Michael Goldberg.
Or Michael Goldberg, exactly. And now you've got 3 hours of sleep and you're dealing with an autistic son and you're like, holy cow.
Right.
How do I do that? And we just take it for granted. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. And dealing with, robbers and drug dealers
Right.
at work was almost like a respite from
Gotcha.
from dealing with autism, which, right, unless you've been in a house with a child with autism on a regular basis, you don't know what the experience entails.
Sure.
And so it is a 24/7 job to redirect, to educate, to push. Right. You got to push a kid with autism because they don't want to get outside their comfort zone. At least my son. Okay. And we have to push him, and he doesn't want to do it. But at the end of the day, he grows from being pushed, just like any kid. But But the experience I had with wrestling is directly affected me on this, and it's just I put up with wrestling. I put up with a lot of adversity, a lot of struggle.
It's a very honest sport, my friend. You cannot hide from it.
Yeah, a lot of failure and a lot of pain in the whole eating, weight loss element of
just try to do everything right
of wrestling
just to get to that next level.
Right. Yeah. Or the fact that you're 13 pounds over on Tuesday, and you've got to deal with all the practices.
Sure.
And then cutting the weight and not really eating too much, and just
we don't do that anymore.
It just kind of sucks.
Back in the day, Back in the day, it was,
but back in the day,
we weren't evolved.
We did that. We jumped rope with plastic bags on, and we lost the weight, wrestled the match, and then we went to Denny's. Yeah. And gained the 13 pounds back in about an
Joy
hour.
Donuts or whatever the heck we did.
But here's the thing: it's like knowing that you can make it through all that pain.
Right.
Get to the test point, which is the match in wrestling, and make it through and still get through that experience and grow from it every time, directly affected my ability to parent Noah. Most families, most couples with a child with autism don't stay together.
Sure.
Families break up.
Right. Speaking of that, you have an older son, Jackson.
Yeah.
Terrific kid, right? And nobody really kind of talks about that. I have my own experience. My uncle Leonard, who was the first state qualifier, place winner, and captain of the Cleveland Heights wrestling program ever, was diagnosed in 1999, paranoid schizophrenic with delusions of grandeur, and really tortured my mother growing up. And my mother was always kind of as the forgotten child because Leonard had to have the attention.
Right.
And was the heartbreak for my grandmother, and this beautiful woman surviving the Armenian genocide, walking through Turkey, and then has to have this as her last heartache. But the other children are sort of kind of forgotten about. Tell me a little bit about your son Jackson and how he's dealt with that, if you wish.
Well, yeah, sure. So Jackson is a great kid, and Jackson is very sensitive to Noah.
Okay.
He loves Noah. He has grown up with the situation where we've had to give the larger share of our attention to Noah.
Sure.
But Jackson, we've carved out very special things for Jackson.
Okay.
He, every chance I got him certified in scuba diving when he was 10.
Oh, cool.
So these were special times when he and I would go to scuba diving trips, just the two of us in Mexico or something. So we have So he wasn't definitely not neglected, and we never missed a school event. We never missed anything because of Noah, and that was a function of being sensitive to Jackson, and also Sherry being really, really good at engineering the situation.
Yes, the true mama bear,
in the best way possible.
Yep.
So Jackson grew up, and I remember thinking, when we first had the diagnosis, we didn't know what the future was going to be like.
Right.
But I did know that Jackson was going to grow up with a great sensitivity
to
to people, and it probably is something that I did not have growing up. I was
Well, who did really? You know,
some people did.
Yeah, they did.
Some people
and
did.
I understand that. You know, my family is similar to that, but I get it. But most kids are just not. You know,
I was not sensitive to people with other special needs and afflicted people, and you know, and it's one of the main regrets I have when I look back at my school years in high school is that I wasn't more sensitive to people that didn't have the same abilities or same neuro capabilities that other people had.
Right.
And Noah's been a great teacher about opening your heart to people.
Sure.
And
and it's beautiful that you have this son, Jackson, that has that sensitivity.
Right.
And he is your DNA.
Right.
You know, so what is our greatest gift is to give the world kids that are better than us.
Right.
You know, now my bar's low, so I'm good because my kids are fantastic. But it's really cool to hear that because we do sort of just accept things, take things for granted that really we shouldn't.
Right.
You know, and also too, I think what we're seeing with this great progression of human evolution, even though there's a lot of stuff that's nonsense out there and a lot of stuff that we could say maybe is de-evolved, you know, there is this, I think, this burgeoning, particularly with what's happening in the internet, the ability to reach out and to find, okay? And so now 20 years ago, there was no place really for a couple that had an autistic child or a child on the spectrum to go. And you and Sherry, particularly Sherry, created at least the knowledge, the center base to have other couples, other people to go to and to find out where they can best help their child.
Well, that's amazing.
It is.
That you would bring that up because this is what I was thinking today. I was at the Autism Walk. There was at least 7,500 people, 10,000 people downtown for this walk. And, you know, when we first got that diagnosis for Noah in 1999, there was 1 in 10,000 kids diagnosed with autism. Wow. 1 in 10,000. Wow. So we were like, we won this really messed up lottery.
Yeah, this
and
crazy
like,
trophy.
how did it become us? And then it eventually became, well, why not us? If it had to be us, you know, who's better equipped?
Right.
My wife, especially so, is just she's
kind of
just
like, why us to wrestle? You know,
well,
why do we chose us to wrestle?
I'm definitely going to get to that because that is related. That's my contribution. But so now there was nowhere to turn.
Right.
Sherry basically invented Autism Speaks in Cleveland. She founded it.
Yeah, I've been at many of those events.
And there was like 5 families, and Sherry like brought them together and started this walk. And now there's 10,000 people downtown walking, and and Sherry did that, and I give her all the credit. I could never have done it. I was the support.
What a great last name that she had before she married.
Love Man.
Love Man.
Mm-hmm.
She truly is a love woman.
Yes.
Yes.
And in the way I look, so I become over the last 20 years and seeing this and watching how this has evolved, I've come to see my whole wrestling experience in a much different light.
Okay.
I don't know that I grew up as an atheist.
Okay.
But I grew up as somebody that really didn't think about God all that much and didn't think about
kind of a secular Jew, right?
Definitely secular Jew, but didn't even think about how the world works and how God manifests himself in the world. And now with hindsight and with this gray beard and I'm an old man and I'm 56 years old, I look back.
That's my rear view mirror, my man. God bless.
I see the wrestling experience as being God's preparation for me to be Noah's father.
I get it.
It's not about, success in law. That's great. I appreciate that. I couldn't do a lot of things that I do without that. But if ever there was a sport, an experience that would prepare you for something that is almost like climbing up Mount Everest if Mount Everest didn't have a top.
Oh, wow.
That's what autism is. You're climbing up a hill that goes on forever. And you need stamina, you need confidence, you need the ability to know that hard work and repetition and creating neural pathways matter. And so now I look back and I say, listen, wrestling at the time was able to focus me, keep me out of trouble, I was able to get some success, and if you win tournaments, medals, scholarship to college,
which you got,
which I got,
yes.
which all of that was great. But in my mind, that was God taking me down a path that I could handle to get me ready to be Noah's father 10 years, 15 years later.
Yes. And that's a beautiful way to look at it.
That's how I look at it.
Beautiful way.
So when I coach, I always tell the kids, I'm like, yes, we have sectionals coming up in 4 weeks, and we have districts after that and state, and it's great. And, winning is great, and trophies and medals are great.
Sure.
And I actually have my district champion.
Love it.
Plaque on my desk.
Love it.
The state second place.
Fantastic.
That's put up somewhere. But
exactly.
the district championship is on my desk, and that meant something to me. But in the way I see it now, and what I've told kids that I've coached is, you're getting ready for something else.
Yeah,
whether it's a challenge you're going to have, like I have, or business, or something that you're going to have to face, where you're just going to have to reach down into that reservoir of toughness that you're getting in this room, where it doesn't really count. Like, okay, so you lose a match, or nothing bad's going to happen to you.
Right.
It is free training towards something that you're going to need where it counts. In the real world.
That is a phenomenal perspective. And as I aged, I always had this internally and in my DNA because of my parents. But I care about graduating great human beings first and foremost, because great wrestling is easy if you have those foundational pieces. And this is what you're talking about. So wrestling is just literally a byproduct of great humanity. And I think this is what you're talking about too, with what you've done and the person that you chose to be your wife. And it's interesting how we choose, right? And all of a sudden now,
that's something that God does too that I didn't know at the time.
He's poised. One of the things too, people ask me, why do you coach? I said, I want to be a rudder. Just keep him on path to point him to that point of light. Okay, as long as that light's not the train coming at you, but you know what I mean? So really, what are we here for? To do the right thing, So having said that, I really you have encapsulated why we do blood time, why I'm doing blood time, why I was called to do this. I have to do this. I can't, kind of like you were called to do this with Noah. You didn't necessarily want to do it, but you're called to do it.
Didn't sign up for it.
Indeed. Well, I'm signing up for this, but I knew that I always had to do this. And Michael, you were the foundation of that. So you made me become an adult. You evolved me, and there's some other people there too. I remember Dr. Tomasic. He got me to think differently. In one class called Philosophy of Religion at John Carroll University, and I applaud John Carroll University because they brought in a guy who constantly questioned God while he believed in God. Interesting guy, right? And so I love that whole intellectual process, and I love what you've done with that and how you brought it back to our sport. Now, blood time is about that combination between the athlete and the coach, and not necessarily about wrestling only. And that's what I'm going to have other people in. We've been talking to some other athletes to come in and talk about that, but this is the common theme that we're hearing, and there's some astounding people out there that are doing some astounding things. So what I'd like to ask you, before we wrap this up, and I could talk to you a long time about it, Michael, because there's so many guys that we've met over the careers, and some of the things that have happened and have been thrown our way. There's some things that weren't that great. There was some people that came into our lives that caused us pain, but more importantly, what we did with it. And so tell me, leave us with something that you would like to resonate to the general public, if there's only one thing to resonate or a couple things to resonate. Because I'll tell you what, when I was talking to Alan Krauss, Alan Krauss, right?
Sure.
Okay. He didn't want to be defined by his surviving of the plane. He wanted to be defined by how calm and peaceful he is, and he just loves life.
Right.
He loves, what I mean? So, so I'm just going to throw it out to you, and I'm going to let you talk, and I'll be quiet.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would say that you can never overestimate the impact of a coach on the long-term development of a player. or his mentee. I personally could have run off the rails a million times in high school and in college. And if it wasn't for coaches like you, Joe Perella, Dominic Amarino, Ronnie Madow, and I'll even throw Jerry Pardue in there, which is a whole nother show.
That's right, stud.
Who gave me a college scholarship when state runner-ups weren't really getting scholarships, and led to a whole another series of events that were crazy, but worked out to be exactly where I needed to be.
Right.
But you can never overestimate the effect of a good coach on a kid. And when I see parents, they want their kids to excel when they're young.
Right.
The best advice I could give them is find them good coaches.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what the sport is.
Right.
It matters who's going to fit into that almost father-like position. Not every coach wants to be a father figure, but to be in that position that they're going to maybe say things and do things and set an example that's going to follow the kid forever.
Sure.
I play things through in my mind to this day, and heading towards 60 years of age,
right,
where I hear Joe Perella, I hear Dominic Amarino, I hear Peter Cimoroni.
Gotcha.
In my head, when certain things come up, and I take the whole experience of wrestling and how it was presented to me,
right,
and it's been essential to my not only not being in jail, and being off the rails when I was a young kid, but whatever success I have in life, that's not due directly to Sherry, my wife. It probably is based on my wrestling experience and the coach's influence. And I'll put Doug Bluebaugh in there too, because even though I only spent 2 weeks of my life with Doug Bluebaugh, he had a huge impact too.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And it's
find good coaches for your kids. That's what I would say.
It's a third-party validation, and sometimes it is the validation of your existence, because we have heard this over and over again in every interview I've done, that the coaches are either the only validation of great foundation, great skills, great internal attributes, as opposed to being a third-party validation because they got great parents. Mm-hmm. So there's both that. There's both that responsibility as the coach to be either sometimes the only validation in a young athlete's life. And so what I'm hearing from you is great, because coaching is an incredibly important part of our society. And what you have done, the ripple effect. See, this is another thing too that I talk about, in the room, both at Beachwood and now at Chagrin Falls, is that good and bad does not happen in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. They ripple. And so when you do good always, if you can. And now you're doing it for people that are in, jeopardy, and you're helping them out. And then also too, you and your wonderful wife are doing some amazing things in the world of autism, and we're thankful for you.
Thank you,
Michael. Thank you so much. Again, this was an emotional interview for me. I love you with all my heart. You are one of the most special people in the world to me. I want to thank you. We are blood. This is Blood Time with Coach Cimoroni. I want to leave you with this thought of the day. The platinum rule: do unto others as they wish and desire to be treated, or do unto others as they so desire. The platinum rule.
Hey everyone, this is Maverick Peters over at MV Podcasting. Just wanted to let you guys know this episode of Blood Time is brought to you by Chad Bronstein and the amazing people at Philo. Check them out today at www.hellophilo.com. That's HELLOFYLLO.com.